Hello. Today we will be discussing who has the greatest Deadeye ability out of all Red Dead games. Although it isn't canon to the Redemption series, I will be including characters such as Red Harlow, Jack Swift, and Mr. Kelly from the Red Dead Revolver game, only because they do make cast appearances in the first Red Dead Redemption game. I will be leaving characters out like Buffalo Soldier, Annie Stokes, and Shadow Wolf because although some of them do appear in Red Dead Redemption 1, they are not notable gunfighters nor are they original characters. Annie Stokes, for example, being about the first rendition of Bonnie McFarlane, and while Red Harlow may look like a carbon copy of John Marston, they do have very different and distinguishable stories that can make us identify the two as two separate entities. We also will not be including characters we don't see in the game at all, such as Otis Miller, Frank Heck, Butcher Brothers, Jack Hall Gang, or Bart Love, simply because we have nothing to go off of, except for perhaps very biased legends that may be over-exaggerated than the reality. For clarification, there will be spoilers in this video because we will be discussing the entire ins and outs of every character. Each character will be given a Deadeye rating from 1 through 10, 1 being the lowest and 10 being the highest. With disclaimers out of the way, let's get started. First on our list, Emmett Granger. Undisputedly one of the worst gunfighters on this list, we learned from The Noblest of Men and a Woman mission that Emmett resides on a pig farm west of Flat Neck Station after cooperating with the US government. It seems that he sold information to the federal authorities in exchange for his farm, which he admits is nothing but shoveling pig shit. Emmett talks a big game at first until finally confronted by the protagonist and shows his true nature. Emmett is a coward who doesn't even duel you with a pistol, preferring a throwing knife instead. Emmett is one of the easiest duels in the game, even having the option to disarm him and execute him via hogtied like some worthless street beggar. He gets a Deadeye rating of 1 out of 10. Second on our list, Agent Edgar Ross. Agent Ross, for the large majority of the Redemption series, doesn't actually show his dueling capabilities. All we know is that he occasionally goes bird hunting with his brother, so he's probably a better shot than Granger. Ross prefers to execute people while they're already injured by someone else or finish the job after it's been nearly completed. Ross has never been one to put himself in a fight, but stood fearlessly in front of Jack Marston and dueled him like a man, gun to gun, which is why he is placed a notch above Granger. He gets a Deadeye rating of 2.5 out of 10. Next, we have Uncle. Uncle is an experienced gunfighter, having been one of, if not the most eldest members of the Vanderland gang. His criminal career precedes his involvement with the gang to years before he ever met Dutch. Uncle in his prime was known for rustling women and said that he was commended for his capable way with a gun several times when he was a younger man. It should be worth noting, however, that this video is dispelling the theory that Uncle is quote-unquote Red Harlow for the simple fact that it has been debunked several times. So for this very reason, we are putting Uncle above Agent Ross for showing more bravery and capability on multiple occasions throughout both games, even holding his own against the US military during the Beecher's Hope raid in 1911. He, however, did not show any phenomenal traits with a gun, such as quick drawing or precise shooting, and a lot of what Uncle says about himself should be taken with a grain of salt, as he is notorious for pathological lying, hence the reason he is so low on this list. He gets a Deadeye rating of 3 out of 10. Up next, Flaco Hernandez. Flaco is a seasoned criminal, having derived from his own gang of 10 men. According to his wiki, he was called the Terror of the Grizzlies because he often raided the towns of Strawberry, Valentine, and Annesburg. By the time of 1899, however, he seemingly went more north and was affiliated with the infamous Del Lobo gang, who controlled vast swaths of New Austin. He is this high on the list because although he may not be the leader of the Del Lobos, he is a very high rank within the Del Lobo organization, more than likely an underboss in charge of the Northern Territory. He is more of a criminal than Uncle, perhaps more ruthless than Ross, and could have killed Emmett Granger in his peak. He gets a Deadeye rating of 4.5 out of 10. After Flacco, we have Billy Midnight. Midnight was an infamous criminal in the West, having beat another gunslinger named Rabbit Matthews earlier in his life, which propelled his notoriety to celebrity status. Midnight is placed higher on this list than the rest because he has blatant proof of his capabilities as a gunman, single-handedly killing another gunslinger while also surviving multiple assassination attempts, which made him psychologically paranoid. During the duel, we witness his technique of drawing and kneeling to one knee so that perhaps his opponent will miss their first shot, but against Arthur, however, he met his match and was successfully killed atop a moving train. He gets a solid Deadeye rating of 5 out of 10. Up next, Slim Grant. Although it isn't certain how many gunslingers Slim has killed in his long career as Marshal of New Hanover, we can only assume he's come in contact with nothing but trouble, including his infamous rivalry with Jim Boy Calloway. Assuming that Jim's cousin, Jed, was nearly as good as Calloway with a gun, we can attribute the slay to Slim Grant as being good enough to kill a rival gunslinger. The fact that Slim Grant invited Jim Calloway to a one-on-one duel says a lot about his credibility as a capable gunfighter, and unfortunately Calloway never arrived at the duel to see it through. He also gets a Deadeye rating of 5 out of 10. After Slim Grant, we have Jim Calloway. This is a toss-up, split decision for me. While Jim Calloway was a very capable fighter and known to be the fastest left-handed draw in the West, it's really uncertain of whether Slim Grant or Calloway were the better gunmen. Some can interpret Slim Grant walking away from Calloway as fear, perhaps making up the story that he challenged Jim Calloway when he really didn't, or was legitimately over the beef between the two men and didn't want anything to do with it. Either way, I do think they should have dueled, but Jim Calloway gets the top spot above Slim Grant for the simple fact that he did kill Slim in the end, and Grant just walked away. A lot of what is said about Jim and his past achievements aren't certain. He even denies killing the Newton twins himself and admits that the public made that story up, not him. So whether he really did kill 14 men in the Battle of Lucy Hollow, or if that was just fabrication by his biographer Theodore Levin, we shall perhaps never know. We do know for a fact, though, that he crossed paths with Black Bill, Flaco Hernandez, and Billy Midnight, which are other notable gunfighters. He gets a solid Deadeye rating of 6.5 out of 10. After Calloway, we have Hosea Matthews. Hosea has always been the brains of the Vanderlyn gang's operations, whereas Dutch's often fall short. With this being said, he was a trusted associate of Dutch and was the gang's second in command for several years. We can only assume that in his youth, Hosea was a very experienced gunfighter, having been an avid hunter and often wore a cavalry draw gun rig around his waist. What we see in Red Dead Redemption 2, however, is an aged and ill Hosea. Someone who's irritable and at the end of their rope with an unknown sickness. Hosea isn't as tough as he was, nor is he probably as fast as he was, but is still considerably accurate on the draw. Hosea participated in the Braithwaite Manor shootout, and had scuffles with the Pinkertons on several occasions, and was tasked with protecting the women and children of the gang when Shady Belle was raided. Hosea was trusted to be a last-ditch defense against the Pinkertons had the Pinkertons been successful in killing everyone else. Hosea is placed above Jim Calloway because he didn't suffer from alcoholism or any other addiction that could have altered his mind in a negative way. Hosea stayed vigilant and collected while also being sharp-minded enough to still participate in some of the earlier plans for heists of the Vanderlyn gang. This isn't to say that had Jim Calloway been sober, that Hosea could somehow outdraw him, but despite Calloway still remaining a fast draw even while under the influence of alcohol, Hosea has a significant edge over Calloway for being completely sober and younger. Hosea gets a Deadeye rating of 6.5 out of 10. Next, we have Black Belle. While perhaps not the fastest draw in the West, Black Belle was an extremely accomplished precision shooter. By today's standards, she would be known as a sharpshooter. Although her lack of draw speed may be seen as a disadvantage, she was still very deadly and shouldn't be underestimated, given that she is one of, if not the sole survivor of the gang she used to ride with, the Coulter-Tobin gang, but also the gunfighters the protagonists come in contact with. A rarity among gunfighters, this means her wit was very strong and her precision was even better, hence why she is above Jim Calloway. She gets a Deadeye rating of 7 out of 10. After her, we have Dutch Vanderlyn. Dutch is a curious case, because although he hasn't shown any quick draw capability, his precision with a gun is clearly 1 to none. He's been in the front lines of massive shootouts such as the Braithwaite Manor, the Blackwater Massacre, multiple train robberies, multiple bank heists, the killing of Cornwall, and the shootout that proceeded in Annesburg, as well as taking on the Spanish military in Guarma and dissolving the entire Angelo Bronte rule over Saint Denis. When the conversation of some of the best gunmen in Red Dead Redemption come up, you'd be insane not to include Dutch Vanderlyn. Dutch's only rivals in a gunfight would have to be Arthur Morgan or John Marston himself, which are both protagonist characters and extremely fluent with a gun. Even then, however, Dutch still exudes swagger when in the first Red Dead Redemption game, Dutch knows John is watching him with binoculars and sends a warning shot by shooting the binoculars out of John's hands from several yards away. Dutch is a dangerous gunfighter, not because of how quick he is, or even by how precise he is, but his ability to somehow always get a drop on the people he wants to kill, one way or another. His intellect, although rivaled by Hosea, makes Dutch more ruthless than his contemporary for the simple fact that he uses it for evil. He waited years to kill Micah on top of Mount Hagen, only shooting him when he knew it was the perfect opportunity to. Dutch is a cunning, patient, and most importantly, conniving antagonist who, unlike Emmett Granger and Jim Calloway, shoots people in the way that he does as just a means of cutting corners rather than being cowardly. For this, Dutch gets a Deadeye rating of 8 out of 10. After Dutch, we have Micah Bell. Micah is one of the most skilled gunmen of the Vanderlyn gang, rivaling that of Arthur Morgan, both in quick draw ability as well as his use in major scuffles, such as the Strawberry Shootout and the Battle for Rhodes when he was accompanied by Arthur and Bill. He's known for his trademark pistols and lived a life of crime before meeting Dutch. He saves Dutch's life after a trade had went wrong, so Dutch quite literally owes his life to Micah. More times than not, Dutch trusts Micah to protect the camp when the gang is away, or keep guard like when they were beached on Guarma. For Micah, he gets an 8.4 out of 10 for saving Dutch, being faster than Dutch, and his ability to nearly solo entire towns. Of course, after Micah Bell, we have Arthur Morgan. Arthur was the third/second in command of the Vanderlyn gang and an experienced gunman. Unlike Micah, who was just another gang hand, Arthur was Dutch's primary enforcer and third oldest member of the gang behind Dutch and Hosea. In the final showdown scene between Arthur and Micah, Arthur is faster to draw his weapon than Micah, meaning he could have cleared leather and shot Micah effortlessly. Despite his illness, he was still a pristine gunman who also killed the aforementioned Jim Calloway, Billy Midnight, Flaco Hernandez, as well as Emmett Granger, writing himself into the Book of Legends. He had been tested several times throughout the game for his experience in gunfighting and accomplished them all, from target shooting to make split-minute decisions to save people's lives such as Bill and John. Arthur has participated in every robbery, heist, as well as gunfight involving the Vanderlyn gang. Arthur gets a rating of 8.8 out of 10 over Micah. Up next, we have Mr. Kelly. First of our Red Dead Revolver characters, Mr. Kelly was an antagonist of Red Harlow. He was the former champion of the Sharpest Shooter contest, not just once, but 3 times of the entire territory. Despite being initially shot 6 times by Red Harlow himself, Mr. Kelly revives himself under suspicious circumstances and duels Red Harlow a second time. Despite losing twice, he is placed above Arthur Morgan just for his sheer accomplishments alone and ability to absorb damage like a tank and keep fighting. This is an ability not replicated from any of the former. Kelly gets a Deadeye rating of 9.3 out of 10. After Mr. Kelly, we have Jack Marston. Jack is a culmination of almost every gang member from the Vanderlyn gang except for Lenny. He looks like a mix between Dutch, Javier, and John. Jack is dangerous because he's very intelligent and literate. Jack turns out to be one of the most dangerous outlaws in New Austin upon the inevitable destruction of Beecher's Hope and the death of both of his parents. He was revered in both the United States and Mexico, having killed Agent Ross for the death of his father and a Mexican pimp south of the border. After the death of John Marston, Jack took up the mantle of fastest gun, succeeding Landon Ricketts after his death as well. Jack stood largely uncontested in New Austin as well as Mexico. Jack gets a solid 9.5 out of 10 above Mr. Kelly for his sheer ability of self-preservation and living longer, and being uncontested by any opponent he met. Of course, after Jack, we have to have John Marston. John was one of the 4 original Vanderlyn gang members behind Arthur. Although for the large portion of his life John was no impressive gunman, he found notoriety later in his life after working with the Pinkertons. He was taught how to gunsling by Landon Ricketts himself, which is someone even Arthur Morgan revered. John's Deadeye ability became greater than anyone else's in the Vanderlyn gang, even Arthur. While Arthur and Dutch were trapped by the US military, they opted to run instead of fight. The military in Red Dead Redemption 1 already had their guns drawn and pointed at John, and he was still able to not only clear leather but kill most of the military posse sent after him before anyone could even pull the trigger or register what just happened. I am not counting John's early capabilities such as completing the gunslinger quest at the end of the game as John, because I certainly believe that the mission was canonically for Arthur. Also, speaking in terms of canonical attributes, I am not counting his epilogue Deadeye because in the first game, John doesn't obtain Deadeye until after meeting Landon Ricketts in Mexico. Rockstar only gave John Deadeye ability in the epilogue because the game's gameplay condition would have dropped severely. With that said, it was primarily a mechanic choice rather than a canon choice. How would I explain his Deadeye and Arthur's Deadeye being different? Well, I'm not saying he didn't have Deadeye completely. I just think it was severely weak in comparison to his contemporaries such as Arthur and Micah. John needed a window to kill Micah, hence why he finished him off after Dutch shot him first. John was more of an assassin for the gang rather than an enforcer like Arthur, and John had at least around 20 years in the gang, so I can't call him completely inexperienced. John gets a 9.9 out of 10 for the simple fact that he managed to capture and kill the rest of his former gang members, including Dutch, and killed large name figures in Mexico such as several Mexican military high-ranked officers such as Santa Anna, helped overthrow Colonel Allende, and won many duels in his lifetime where he was infamously called the Legend of the West. After John Marston, it only makes sense for us to mention Landon Ricketts. Landon Ricketts was the best gunfighter in the Red Dead Redemption canon. Ricketts even admits it himself that he had to have been the best because he was the last one left. Ricketts was on the side of the law, having famously killed the Butcher brothers as well as hold his own against the Vanderlyn gang during the Blackwater Massacre in 1899. He had a few more duels and scuffles in California around 1907 before moving to Mexico to serve as a local vigilante for the Mexican military. Given his age and his experience, I don't doubt that Landon Ricketts could have killed a John Marston while Marston was in his prime. Whereas Ricketts taught John a lot, I don't think he taught him everything. Ricketts had the age and experience, and no one else can take that away from him considering he was the oldest surviving gunfighter in the Redemption series. Landon dies in his sleep in 1911, much like Jack, being largely uncontested by anyone else. Ricketts gets an amazing Deadeye score of 10 out of 10. After Ricketts, we have Red Harlow. Harlow is by far the most legendary character in the Red Dead franchise. He is mentioned as a legend by pedestrians in Red Dead Redemption 1, as well as in Red Dead Redemption 2. He has several Easter eggs attributed to him throughout both games, which you can search up in your own downtime. Onto his feats as a character. As assisted by the Red Dead wiki, quote, Red single-handedly took out multiple gangs, he killed a 4-time dual champion, Mr. Kelly, and he pretty much took out the Mexican army and killed hundreds of US soldiers. He hunts down people like Arthur and John multiple times in the game and walks away rather unscathed, unquote. Harlow is also the only Red Dead protagonist to complete his story and not be killed before it's over. He survives his entire mission in life, becomes a better man, and lives the rest of his life blissfully. Of course, given that we don't know the true fate of Jack Marston. Other than the fact that Harlow is a playable character in Red Dead Redemption 1 online, brings us a bit closer to legitimacy even if canonically he shouldn't be there. Harlow gets a Deadeye score of 10.5 out of 10. Now, for the moment you've all been waiting for, who I personally think is the best gunfighter in the entire series, Jack Swift. A British Englishman, Jack Swift has the craziest Deadeye I've ever seen. Just look at this. Actually with an automatic marking, but Jack's is far superior and faster than Arthur's for the first half of the game. And considering you don't keep this ability as Arthur, still puts Swift above him tremendously. He is a rumored legend as well, just as Red Harlow, but there are attributes that make him better than the latter. Jack had dual-wield revolvers, meaning he had 12 shots instead of 6. he was impeccably quick with reloading as well as firing, and the governor himself of Red Dead Revolver actually excludes Swift from participating in the final tournament because he knew Swift would easily kill Mr. Kelly and wanted Kelly to kill Harlow instead. Of course, this didn't happen, but this means outside opinions concurred with the idea that Swift was better than Harlow. Swift was an outlaw, having robbed banks as well as trains, and yet Harlow, who was an active bounty hunter at the time, never thought of turning Swift in. Whether this be due to loyalty or fear of Swift's capabilities, it is unknown. Many people assume Swift died trying to save Harlow, but I don't agree with this theory. Just because it's the last time we see him doesn't mean he's dead. Swift was already one of the quickest draws in the franchise, and when he was encountered by the man in the doorway, he was already pointing both guns at them. I believe Swift made quick work of the man and found his own exit. This is purely speculation, however, and neither theory has been confirmed by Rockstar themselves. But given information we are awarded, I am giving Swift a Deadeye score of 11 out of 10. I hope everyone enjoyed this video. I've been working on this script for 2 months now, not including the editing. I have a new microphone now, so hopefully the quality of my videos will be better. If you can drop a like, it would be greatly appreciated, and I will see you all next time.